Welcome to the UARC meeting tonight. We got an interesting class discussion we're going to have. First off, do we have any new members? First timers here? Any upgrades? Yeah. All right. Classes. Do you want to talk about that, James?
Oh yeah, for sure. Thank you so much. Yeah, so good evening. This is KK7AVS James again. So I do teach classes. I teach technician over Zoom. I do that Monday nights at 6:30. So if you want more information, please visit the Salt Lake Crossroads Amateur Radio Club website, slcarc.com. Go to training and send a request, and I can send you some links. Or if you want to go to our study drive, please visit training.k7xrd.club. That's training.kilo7xray-radio-delta.club, as in ham radio club. And there's information to join the Zoom class, and you can meet us there every Monday night at 6:30 p.m., and I teach technician. But if you're interested, if you already do have your radio license and you want to upgrade to general, I do actually hold general classes over the air. I do that over the Crossroads 2-meter repeater. So I meet there on Tuesday nights the following evening at 7 p.m. on the Crossroads repeater 147.160 megahertz positive 600 kilohertz offset and a PL tone of 127.3 hertz. If you're not able to make it into the repeater, try the Utah Web SDR, and you should be able to make it into there pretty well. But again, 147.160 megahertz positive 600 kilohertz offset and a PL tone of 127.3 hertz at 7 p.m. if you want to study for your general. Thanks.
James, that was train at k7xrd.club?
Training at k7xrd.club. And there's plenty of study material in there, previous class recordings, as well as little workbooks and stuff like that I wrote over the last 3 years with my KI7MTI.
Okay. That's great. Our next meeting, the important thing about next meeting is it's going to be potluck at the Salt Lake County offices on 2001 South State Street. And we're in the South building. And it's in the cafeteria that's right in the entrance, the north entrance of that building. So don't go to the north building, it's the north entrance of the South building. I've had people do that. All right. Do we have any specials on the books this month? You want to talk about that, Rick, for a minute?
Well, it's not a book, but we have 2025 ARR calendars that do have dates of significance in ham radio, as it were. Like the 18th of April is World Amateur Radio Day. Did you know that? I did not. We do have some that are marked down. Amateur Radio Transceiver Performance Testing, Henson Keek's 18th edition. The Doctor is in Volume 1. And I thought there was another, but those are the only ones I see right now. So let me know if there's anything you would like to order. We can give you a 10% off. Thank you.
All right, and we're still have hats with the club sign on it for sale, if any of you are interested. Couple of things that are important coming up. Have a swap meet. That's the VHF Society swap meet. It will be at the end of March. And the digital conference, which is also a VHF Society, that is at the end, it's on February 28th. And the VHF Society of Utah will have their business meeting at the end of that conference. So if you want to be involved in the business meeting, which they do some voting in the general membership, that's where you need to be. And it ought to be a pretty good conference. Swap meet's always going to be at the same place it has been up in Layton. And that's always a fun thing to go to. And I know UARC's going to have some radios and stuff up there for sale. That ought to be pretty good. I know of at least one HF or maybe more, and I do know of a 40-foot tower that's available if anybody's interested. So actually a 40-foot tower and miscellaneous antennas, including a HF Yagi with rotor. So those are available for sale. And tonight we have, as a special presentation, it's going to be by Jerry. And she is going to talk about the HOA initiatives that are in the legislatures, right? Now, the importance of that, I think it's going to be discussed, and it is an interesting topic because how much influence does the HOA have over everybody that lives in one? And so, all right, so we'll let Jerry take over and give us the rundown as to what's going on legislatively. Oh, Jerry also works with the legislature both here in the state and federally, so she's aware of how it all works and what needs to be done.
Thanks. So if I can get my PowerPoint up, I've asked James not to cut back and forth to the pictures. For those of you in the room, you're stuck with it. But for those of you online, Jerry has a face and body built for radio. And so that's probably best that those folks online don't have to look at all of me. For those online that feel like they really need to, there's a picture in the upper left-hand corner to scare you. So the topic I'm going to talk about is a Utah ARRL section initiative dealing with HOAs. And if you look at ham radio publications, almost every antenna ad has something in it about stealthiness and dealing with HOAs. And amateur radio operators, for the most part, are very law-abiding, except when it comes to HOAs. What we do is basically say, well, I'm going to put up an antenna and hope like heck that the Karen in the neighborhood doesn't catch me. And we advertise how to get around your HOA with my various whiz-bang 5,000 antenna. And it's really not part of our ethos to get around regulations and laws. We're so law-abiding that the FCC allows us to police ourselves. And that's not allowed in any other radio genre except amateur radio. And so, you know, stealth antennas are what we talk about a lot at ham cons and everything else, and we've even talked about them here. And I'm not going to talk about stealth antennas. I'm going to talk about putting up an antenna and telling the Karen to pound sand and how you can help make that happen. And this initiative is going to be across the state of Utah. And some of the folks that will hear this presentation are going to be from places where HOAs are not really found. But you'd be surprised, most of the home lots in Daggett County, for example, are organized around an HOA. In fact, 74 million, more than 74 million Americans live in an HOA. In Utah, 1 in 5. And Utah is one of the states with the highest percentage of home ownership lots that are covered by an HOA. And the Intermountain West is one of the highest areas in HOA participation and use. And so nationally, 67% of new construction is HOA. And in Utah and the Intermountain West, it's 71% of new construction. So if you don't live in an HOA, your kid will, or you will find yourself moving there. Somebody asked earlier, will this thing we're talking about do anything for folks in apartments? And the answer is no, I'm sorry. Can't get there right now. So one of the things that I hear out of amateur radio people all the time, and as the state government liaison for the Utah section, I get called all the time about, I thought there was a law that said I can put up a tower in my property. And for those of you that were here a while back and heard Scott talk about the travails of putting up a tower, there is an FCC rule, PBR1, which basically was passed by, the ARRL really introduced it and pushed it, really back in the late 70s. And basically what it says is that state and local government cannot absolutely say, you can't have a ham radio tower, or you can't have an antenna. Not in our town you can't, the planning and zoning people. But it specifically exempted private property organizations like HOAs. And so for the last several decades, ARRL has been trying to get a version of PBR1 through the US Congress that would apply to HOAs. And HOAs have been able to remain really, really strong, except nationally in 2 areas. Satellite and off-air TV dishes and antennas, and flagpoles. Because a lot of vets want a flagpole. A lot of Americans want a flagpole. And it's un-American to say the Karen in the neighborhood says you can't have a flagpole. Now, one of the things to know about PBR1 is what PBR1 is not about. It does not allow you to put up a 200-foot tower in your backyard, or 199 feet, 11 and a half inches, as it says on the technician test, unless you're near an airport. Local municipalities can put reasonable regulations, as Scott talked about, and Scott pulled permits, had engineering inspections down in Santa Quin after 100-mile-an-hour wind. They upped their requirement for amateur radio antennas to be able to survive 120-mile-an-hour wind. And if you've been where the coming down, 6 through the canyon there, 120-mile-an-hour wind is not out of the possibility. And so for safety reasons, for those sorts of things, cities and towns can put reasonable regulations. HOAs can out and out say, we're not going to have any ham radio antennas. And they can fine you, they can, HOAs are incredibly powerful. They can take your property. And so the Karens of HOAs are a real problem. And so a lot of you are aware that ARRL has created a website tool that you can get to called sendaletter.org/HOA. And you type in your address and your call sign, or actually type in your call sign, and it'll look up your address from the FCC, then go out and figure out who your congressperson is and your 2 senators, and send them a lovely pre-done letter that says, I'd really like you guys to put this bill forward and move it in the legislature. And I urge each and every one of you to do that, not because Senator Lee or Senator Curtis is going to read the letter, but they do keep their staff keep tick marks in the margin of their books about how many things they're getting on what. And it is a way for us to start to build some traction on moving this on a national level. However, there's a concept in politics called understand the context. And right now, not much is happening in Washington as far as laws getting passed or anything like that through the Congress, unless you are a very moneyed organization, to quote the loyal resistance. If you're a billionaire, you can get something through Congress. Or if I can, depending on which party you happen to believe in, if I've got a way to screw the other party with some legislation, we're going to push that through. But basically, the United States Congress right now is pretty sclerotic. Nothing's really happening. And so the hope that they're going to take up a bill for a group of people that represent a small percentage of the population and actually give us this is very unlikely in the current legislative session. And to be frank and about the next legislative session, it's over at the end of the year. And so any law would have to be reintroduced into the next Congress. And so the chance of this passing on a national level is not too high. So what can we do? And so at the late October, the ARRL forum was held at the divisional meeting at HamCon, Colorado. And so that was our divisional HamFest. And there was national ARRL representative. There was our division manager, our assistant division manager, who is a member of this club, and several other clubs, Mel Parks, and all of the section managers from each of the states. Now realize I'm an ARRL person. I'm wearing an ARRL badge. So I'm pro ARRL, but like nationals want to do at these things, the national person didn't really want to answer a ton of questions if they didn't need to. So the first thing they did was throw out a question to all of the section managers saying, so what big initiative are you going to do in your section to help amateur radio? Well, about 30 minutes prior to this, I was sitting with our section manager having a cup of coffee, and we were talking about things, and we were talking about legislative things. And I said, we might be able to get a bill through the Utah State Legislature and do what we're trying to do on a national basis. And I said, it would take us probably 2 years to do it. And he said, you really think we could do that? And I said, yeah. I said, in fact, Utah was one of about 4 states that passed PBR 1 before it made it through the U.S. Congress. So right now, there's another state that has done this successfully, and that's Virginia. Virginia has a law on the books that says HOAs can't just flat out say no amateur radio or no amateur radio antennas. And this is something that we could do in Utah. And so Brett was up there. We just talked about this, and I thought we'd talk about it for some months. And so Brett was asked what big thing the Utah section is going to do, and he says, we're going to introduce a bill into the Utah legislature to get PBR1 applying to HOAs in the state of Utah. And after I picked myself up on the floor, realizing as the SGL, this is now my problem, and I never should have had coffee with him in the first place, we have been working on this initiative. And how are we going to do this? And so we have a 55-line bill that we could enter into the state legislature. And this bill isn't what everybody wants. It's not going to allow you to put up a 100-foot tower, next to your HOA property or something like that, or tell them, I want to put up, an antenna to do Earth-Moon bounce that's, 20 yards by 10 yards. You're not going to be able to do that. But what this would do is tell HOAs that they can't out and out say no. And if they want to say no, their reasons must be reasonable. They must be based on safety and a few other things. And whatever regulations or restrictions they put on it need to be the least restrictive to accomplish the reasonable outcome that the HOA is looking for. And so there's a whole lot of political science behind all of this, and I know ham radio folks love political science as much as we love slamming our hand in a car door. But this little diagram up there came from a company that I used to be the managing director of that ran bills and got things done both nationally and locally. And it's basically a very simple concept. You need to understand the context of the political situation, and if that context is well understood and you have any kind of chance of winning, then if you put together a solid executable strategy and execute it, you will pass your bill or elect your candidate or any other kind of issue that you're doing. It's very, very simple. And so that's what we're going to try and work along. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about the context that we're in and why I think if you'll get involved, there is an opportunity for us. So many people claim all kinds of organizations, including religious organizations, run the state of Utah, or at least the legislature. And that's actually very incorrect. The people who run the legislature are the developers, particularly the organization known as the Utah Board of Realty. And the Utah Board of Realty, these are the people that moved the prison. And they built a $1 billion prison and they didn't have enough money to staff it and got sued because they were killing inmates with mosquito-borne illnesses. But by God, we're putting in houses at Point of the Mountain. So this is the tail that wags the Utah dog. And these folks are, for the most part, very pro-HOA. Developers love HOAs because it means they don't have to deal with municipalities about deeding over streets and all kinds of reasons. HOAs are wonderful. And the Karens of the world love getting on the HOA board. If you live in an HOA, for God's sakes, as a ham radio operator, run for the HOA board. This is very, very important. Scott lives in an HOA. He didn't really bring that. You've got a three house HOA, so you live in an HOA. Now, luckily, the board is 3 houses, 3 people on the HOA, so Scott came in with a 1/3 minority, and it wasn't nearly as bad as being out in some place like Daybreak. But the legislature may be willing to deal with the Karen problem of HOAs for ham radio for a couple of reasons. One, just the term Karens of the HOA has become a national issue. It's covered, on reels and threads on X and on Facebook and everywhere else. It's in the newspaper of all the outrageous things that HOAs are doing. So HOAs are not popular among the general public. And this has yielded some fruit here in Utah. The HOAs in Utah did not want any solar in their properties, for the most part. And so the solar industry went to the legislature. Again, they have a little bit of money, they have a little bit of power, no pun intended, and they were able to convince the legislature to pass something that's very similar to PBR1 for solar cells. Now, it says, look, if you're going to put solar cells on the roof, you got to put them up there so we can't see them. Or at least they could do that if they wanted to. They can't just say outright no. And if you share a roof with somebody, the other guy's got to agree. But your neighbor across the way, doesn't have to agree. You don't have to get everybody to agree. And so with some reasonable restrictions on HOAs, they can say things like, you need to have enough insurance if one of those things blows over and hits your neighbor that, you're covered. Things like that. If you need to put a little, piece of flashing up there or whatever so it blends in better, they could do that. But they can't say no. The other thing which really struck me is, and this has happened in the last 3 sessions. In the last session, you can't really say Utah has been very pro-electronic vehicle. And so they passed a bill through the legislature, and there's not a big electronic vehicle lobby in Utah. There's no money to be made in big terms that would interest the legislature. And yet they passed a bill that allows essentially PBR1 for electronic vehicle charging stations. And so 2 bills taking down the Karens of HOAs. So with a reasoned argument, the legislature is willing, including the members of the Board of Realty, to stand up to HOAs and be rational and reasonable. And that's new. And that creates a very different context. Additionally, the current administration has cut funding at CISA and at FEMA, which deal with disasters. And they've basically said, states, you're on your own. Several red states have had tornadic disasters and other things like that and been basically told to pound sand. The federal government hasn't given them anything. And a couple of years ago, in the state of Utah said, we really don't need ham radio operators at a state level for MCOM. If you can, you go serve your local entity, go talk to your mayor. In other words, we don't want you at the state level. And another state did that, and that was North Carolina. And I won't get into the politics of all of that, but North Carolina had some significant hurricanes. South Carolina got it too, among other people. But North Carolina had some really rough times out of this. They didn't get a lot of help out of the federal government. But more importantly, their communications fell apart. They had done something that Utah had done. Utah spent millions and millions and millions, as in 3 figures of millions, on their new communications network for public safety, with the idea that this network will take care of everybody in government should we have a disaster. And the truth is, if we have a tornado or we have a flood someplace, it will. But if we have a big earthquake, the big one, it's not going to work. And that's what happened with the hurricane in North Carolina. And if some of you were paying attention, as ham radio operators do, to the news, you heard all these pleas coming out in local radio and television all over North Carolina saying, are there any ham radio operators out there? We need you. So that adds to the context of this. We now have a story to tell about free service out of folks who are community-minded and a bunch of things. And so this creates a context that we can work with. And so we put a strategy together, and we've looked at what are the biggest things that are likely to get in our way. And the biggest one is apathy. Amateur radio operators don't really want to get involved. We don't like to haul ourselves out and talk to people. We'll rather do that on the air. And then we only want to talk to the kind of people that are doing the DX I do, or the MCOM I do, or the FT8 I do, and things like that. And some of us are on the autistic spectrum. Some of us are just on the curmudgeon spectrum, and all of these other spectrums. And so we don't necessarily get out and talk to people in the community. And then when we do, we say things like, well, when all else fails, we'll be there for you. Well, that doesn't really mean anything to people that aren't in ham radio. So we need people that are willing to get involved in this process. It's going to be 2 years, and I'm not asking you for a lot, but if you all can't get involved, and if we can't convince other amateur radio operators in the state to get involved, we can't pass this. But if we will, we're 1.1%, and we can make a difference. And so if we will work together, we can pass this. So what do we need to do? Well, there's two things. One, you've got to get to know the decision makers. Who's going to pass this bill? What most people do when they're about to do something you don't like at the legislature is you call up your legislator and you get a voicemail at best. Typically this time of year while the session is in session, you'll get mailbox is full. So you go up to the Capitol maybe and you can't find your legislator because he hides behind locked doors and isn't going to talk to you. You used to be able to send a note in. You can't do that anymore. And so it's very hard to get to your legislator during the session. And it's not like most of us even know who our legislator is. I mean, honestly, how many of you actually know who your member of the House of Representatives are? So, maybe we got 4 out of the 20 people in this room. And, who's your senator? Those sorts of things. And it's very important that you know who this person is, that you know their number, and you know their address. And you get to know them. Their picture is available online at the legislature, it's website. And you cut that picture out like a wanted poster. And when you're going to the grocery store, when you're filling gas, when you're whatever, you're going to find this person. They are in your community. And you just come up and say, hi, I'm Jerry Brummett. Thank you for your service in the legislature. I live over on such and such a street. I'm the person with the ham radio antenna. By the second or third time you say hi to them, they will know your name. I guarantee you, particularly this year, because this year is an election year. So 100% of the Utah House of Representatives is up for re-election. 1/2 of the Senate is up. So they want to talk to you. All I'm asking you to do is know who this person is. And since an election is coming up, figure out who the candidates are. So you might as well talk to both candidates. If a Democrat's been holding that seat in your city or county area for a long time, then chances are a Democrat's going to get there. If it's a Republican, chances are a Republican's going to get there. But it's good to know both. And just introduce yourself. Just be nice. You can mention the ham radio thing if they ask what that is. Say, we talk around the world and we're the largest emergency communications group available in the world. Not much more than that. In the meantime, we'll be putting talking points together. But you don't need to hit them with the talking points now. I want you just to get to know them, know who they are, know their address so that you can wander by their house, okay? If you really like them, you know, you could give them a donation. That really greases the, you know, the skids. Lots of things like that. And you now have a relationship. And who you know is critically important. We'll provide you talking points at the right time so that you have the right what to know to talk to them about after you've made a relationship. If they know you, if they've met you a couple of times, if you've been nice and said thank you for your service, when you go to talk to them about something, or if a ham bill comes up, they're going to, there's a ham radio guy in my neighborhood, it's over on that, and they'll go find you because you got an antenna. They can find you. And they'll ask you questions about it. And this is all we need to do as 1.1% when it gets time to push this through the legislature. So what's our plan? So right now, apathy is our biggest problem. So we're going to spend the next couple of months going to ham radio meetings and things around the state. We're looking for people in clubs who want to be involved and are willing to just be on an email tree and things like that so that we can, you know, coordinate which legislators do we know, those sorts of things. And then we'll get out, and through this election is how we get to know them and how we build a relationship. And then we will not introduce the bill at the next session, and the reason is each legislator gets 2 bills that they can put into the legislature and actually have them heard. And there are very few legislators right now, until we get a mass together, that are going to use their 2 bills to get our bill heard. We may be able to get it into the legislature, but then it'll just sit there and die. And we don't want that. So right after the session is when we will introduce the bill. And the legislature meets monthly through most of the rest of the year. And that's when the deals are made. And there's a statement in politics that really works. It's one I've used for years, and it's locomotives only go where the tracks are laid. And initiatives in Washington and in our state seem to come out of nowhere, and they have all this power behind them, and they're like locomotives. But somebody's laid the tracks for that locomotive. And we'll do that part on the session if you will know your legislator enough that you could feel comfortable calling them up. And they might, you know, they might not remember your name completely, but as soon as you give it to them and say, I'm the ham radio person, I saw you at the grocery store 6 weeks ago. They'll go, oh yeah. Okay? That's what we need out of you. That's the real effort we need out of you. And we'll give you what to tell them when we tell you to call them and talk about the bill. So then during the interim session, we will be negotiating with the Board of Realty and the HOAs and all the rest of this, and push back and forth on our 55-line bill that will change probably into a 100-line bill, and lots of other happiness that will go on behind the scenes that you don't have to do anything with. We've got that for you. And then when the following session starts, if we've done our job correctly, you know, we'll have you calling them in, you know, around Christmas, around Thanksgiving, and saying, hey, there's this bill that's going to come up. And they'll say, oh yeah, I know about it. We've been looking at it in interim. I really need you to support this bill. Some of you are going to become closer to your senators or your legislators, and we're going to call on you to help get those folks to sponsor the bill during the interim and during this period. If we can get it through the interim, then what will happen is we can go on what's called the consent agenda, which means in very early January, in the first few days of the legislature, there will be a vote in the House and then in the Senate, and then it goes off to the governor for a signature. And it doesn't even really make the newspaper. It's how the done deals get done in Utah. So that's our plan. Now, if you guys are really willing to do this, and will get off your butt and meet your representatives, your senators now, we may be able to push this up by a whole year. But I don't want anyone to think that's how long it's going to take. But if you'll get involved, we can do this. And again, your part in this plan is really pretty easy. I'm not asking much of you, honestly. This is less effort than it takes to go out and do a POTA activation. Okay? Look up who's running for the legislature, meet them, be nice, follow up after the election. Okay? So how do I do this? Well, you can go out to something like Ballotpedia, look up your sample ballot, put in your address, just like basically you did when you sent the letter to Congress, right? It's a little more involved than that, but not much. And it will tell you who's on the ballot. You know, the Democrat, the Constitutionalist, all of those folks. You can meet as many of them as you want, but really you just need to meet the Democrat and the Republican. And, you're in great shape. And you should be doing this anyway because you should be an informed voter. We all say we should do this, but we don't do this. And, it'll give you their picture. So if you didn't get it off the legislative site, here's your wanted poster. You can put them, print them out and stick some Scotch tape up on the visor of your car as you're driving around. It's great fun. It's a little bit like POTA spotting. And so you're just going to legislative spot. And then we'll work this session. And when we get to the negotiation part and those sorts of things, we'll give you what we need you to pitch to the legislators. Very, very simple, very, very straightforward. And so, again, this isn't about partisan politics. I don't want to turn you into a Democrat. I don't want to turn you into a Republican. I don't want you to be pro-Trump. I don't want you to be anti-Trump. Whatever you are, we can live with that. Ham radio isn't political, but it is about getting things done. And if you don't get a little political or involved in politics, politics is going to be done to you. And we've lost a lot of spectrum. And people grumble and say, well, that's what ARRL's for. Except people aren't sending them money. It takes money to do this. People aren't calling and being involved. It takes time. You can't win a contest if you don't participate. And this is what we're asking you to do. And, when we'll have talking points for you to engage with the community, your friends and neighbors, and engage with your legislators. And, 3 or 4 things to tell them that we know will interest them. So it'll probably be things dealing with funding and the cost of things and stuff like that, and how amateur radio can cut those costs. We're going to look for things that are interesting to legislators that we actually do. And we're not good at knowing what we do. We're good at running the radio and playing radio and all of that, but we're not good at actually saying what it is that we do to improve the community as a whole. And so we'll get you those talking points. We'll have you a little one-pager. We're not going to ask you to memorize a ton of questions. It'll be easier than the technician exam by a whole lot. And if any of you are really wanting to get involved in this process, if this speaks to you as something you could do, there is room on the ARRL field staff for folks to work with the state government liaison, local government liaison positions. And so you can see me about those too. And so I've thrown a lot at you, and I'm sure that the room is looking much, much like this picture. So with that, does anyone have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Beyond just meeting legislators, are they, there could be other initiatives to publicize the issue and to team up with other groups who are trying to structurally constrain the authorities of, or the authority of FHAs. So has the ham radio community thought of teaming up with other groups to do that?
Yes. And right now, the most active people coming against HOAs are the people who live in mobile homes. And the legislature's not been very attentive to those. We should be so lucky to be blessed with an ugly HOA and Karen, who, you know, I don't know, wants to find people over their trash can placement or some other thing, you know, the fact that they have a, they park their cop car or ambulance in the driveway. We should pray for such a thing, because that adds to the context. If there's an outrage, we will work with those people who have been outraged. And, you know, we will get them all the press they can get. And again, we will put out, you know, talking points and everything and work with anybody who's on our side. Right now, we're really interested in talking to ham radio people and ham radio people's neighbors, because we need to build our own ground force. We need to understand each other, and we need to get together and rally behind this issue. Because if we can't do that, we're not going to be any good to any other group that might have an issue, and we're not going to get this done. So right now, working together as amateur radio operators and deciding this is a problem that we want to do something about is really, the section can't do this without you. It's just that simple. Scott?
Jerry, since this year is an election year, there will very likely be candidates' nights.
Yes.
And that is a very good place to introduce yourself to whoever's running for the House seat or the Senate seat in your district.
And that's a really good point. And so one of the things, as we get closer to election time, starting really right around the time we do field day, and if we can get, you know, a good turnout closer to the city for field day, one of the things we might ask you to do, for example, is, hey, we're going to throw, some hot dogs on the grill at noon, and we're going to have some candidates come, because the candidates want to meet people in their area. The problem with that is, you know, we're really going to have a hard time because Salt Lake is so dense with people. This will really work in places like, Garfield County and things like that. That's where we're really going to do a lot of this, because it's one guy over a whole lot of things. And so if they can find a way to sit down with 20 people, they will be all over it. Plus, it's great for those small clubs' field day scores. So in our club, we might do things like really go after, if we're going to activate a POTA place, we'll put out in the club that we're going to be at such and such a park, and then we'll try, we may say, be nice and sit down and talk to these two candidates or this candidate. And in political terms, we call these cottage meetings, and every candidate wants them, but they're really hard to get put together. So if I can give them a captive audience of 10 or 15 people, they will remember that you talked to them, and we can bring up amateur radio issues with them. Yes, sir?
They also, even now during the session, hold
Town halls. Yeah. They're doing less and less of that, and one of the things about the session is they're incredibly busy, and the ones that are holding the meetings are the ones that aren't busy. And we don't need the most powerful people in the legislature, but we don't need the ones that aren't busy. We need the ones in the middle. And then we don't want to hit them right after the session, because most of them have to sleep it off for about 3 weeks. And so if that's, and again, we won't make you learn all of this kind of how do you get your legislator up against the wall. That's our job. But, we'll give you what you need to do. We just need you to say, we can do this, and I am willing to be involved. Sean.
Hey, Jerry, I just want to
if you can get them to know who the legislator is, but if you as the ham radio operator know who this person is, then, you know, if you happen to be at the market with your kid, make sure your kid says it. Oh my God, do they love kissing kids. You know, if you're a veteran, mention that to them, because not that they're going to vote one red dime for veteran issues, but they love to wrap themselves in the flag and be seen with a veteran. So, and this is jaded politics from people who've done this in DC and here in Utah.
And then what is your thought on emailing our legislatures with email blasts in regards to some of this?
Well, when we get to the point of having a bill, you know, we've got a couple of sponsors and some things like that, then that's when we will be sending you guys out, you know, an email that tells you this is the kind of email you want to send. What I don't want to do is what ARRL is doing, which is sending out a form letter. Because politicians are really smart on form letters. They say, oh, okay, so there's some small group out there, you know, twisting people's arms to send me a letter. So, you know, we'll give you 8 or 10 or 15 things you could say, pick 2, you know, and that will have more of an impact. And we'll do that, you know, during the interim session in particular, right before our bills are being heard and things like that. And then, honestly, if I could have 100 ham radio operators that I could call on sometime over the summer during the interim session that would show up at the Capitol to a hearing room and just pack that hearing room. You know, we'll have a few people that we've primed to talk and things like that. We'll get this in no time at all. And we could probably do this much faster than 2 years. If I had 50, we've really got a good shot. But it really takes us having people from around the state, and you've got to want this. If you don't want it, it isn't going to happen. And wanting it as a dream isn't the same thing as, you know, I really want a 200-foot tower and, you know, I want a 1,500-watt amplifier and the rest of it. And so, you know, I take my tablet into the potty and I look at the QST ads about those sorts of things, and it doesn't go any further than that. And that's the apathy of the ham radio community. So to be very blunt and crude, we got to get off the pot and do this. James.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. So I have a friend, Tim, W7RLI.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in an apartment in an HOA in West Jordan.
Mm-hmm.
And recently, the HOA came up to him and gave him a few documents. He had a roll-up J-pole. He lives in an HOA.
Mm-hmm.
He had a roll-up J-pole and a collapsible HF antenna
Mm-hmm.
out on his balcony. And they caught him and they sent him pictures of it, I guess, and documents apparently when he signed and moved into the apartment. Apparently he signed away his rights to have an antenna and stuff like that.
Yes.
I mean, is there anything we can do about that, or?
Well, so if this were to pass, the homeowner of the apartment, okay, would have to agree with their tenant putting up an antenna. And then that homeowner would have to go to the HOA and say, I want to, you know, I have a tenant who wants to put up an antenna. And so private property rights, and this is why HOAs were exempted originally in PBR1, is we're saying, okay, well, you know, it's 5 homes on 100 acres, and they want to have some control over what you put up. And, you know, we've been loath to tell private property owners that they have to do something, particularly if it's not something the government cares about one way or the other. If the legislature cared about this, you know, one way or the other, then it would be decided. But, you know, telling a private landowner that he has to put up Christmas lights, or she has to, you know, celebrate Easter or something like that, they're loath to do that. They may put up an Easter display in downtown and fight like hoof and nail to have that against court suits and everything else. But they don't want to do that with private property and HOAs. And so a step forward is on landowners, which if you're in a homeowners association, you're actually a landowner. And you have less rights than the landowner who, there's some folks in Oklahoma that found out they didn't own the mineral rights underneath their home, and they ended up with an oil well in the backyard and nothing from the oil well. So there's all kinds of property rights, and this gets complicated. Renters have almost no rights, and that's a real challenge. And so, part of his lease from the owner of the property was that the lease would include the HOA, that you have to follow the HOA rules. So they could be liable for fines and all kinds of other things, and you have almost no ability to fight it.
Yeah, the thing that really surprised me, sorry to
Go ahead.
add to it. Yeah, there was a paper that he signed on his lease when he first moved in. The paper was totally about antennas, saying that you can have 0 antennas. And yeah, is that something?
And so this was what HOAs were doing, and they were saying no flagpoles. And what it took was veterans going to city council meetings and going to legislatures and talking about their service and all of this and how important it is to have a flagpole. Now, HOAs are required under federal law to allow you to have a flagpole. They can put reasonable restrictions on it, like where you can put it, and they can keep you from going over 20 feet and all kinds of things. But there's a really cool flagpole antenna that honestly would meet HOA rules, and you're not being stealthy, you're just putting it up. Now, it's a compromise antenna. It isn't one that would work well for me, but they're pretty, and I do understand the flag flapping around on one of my friends that has it and likes the antenna, says that, occasionally that causes the thing to wiggle and gives them some QRM. So, all antennas are compromises, but they can't just say you can't have a flagpole. And the other thing that came out, and again, it was the direct TVs of the world, that they had money. And so they went in, and so HOAs cannot now prohibit an off-the-air antenna for television, but that law specifically does not cover amateur radio. It says amateur radio antennas are not included in this protection. I mean, it's about as obvious as you can get that, they don't love us, or they didn't back then. And dish antennas and things like that, so you can have one on your deck or your balcony or whatever, but they can put reasonable restrictions on it. And so HOAs, it's best to say, well, I don't want an HOA. But more and more, it's very difficult to find communities that aren't HOAs. Any other questions? Go ahead, Sabra.
Yes, I just wanted to say really quickly that because autistic people were mentioned in the presentation, accessibility issues, social walkouts, and biases are what is reducing autistic people's involvement in the craft, not a personal effort to not integrate. But I just wanted to mention that since autistic people were mentioned specifically.
Yeah, and just so you know, I have autistic family members, a child on the spectrum, other things like that. But one of the things that's true of amateur radio is we have more autistic people per capita than other organizations. But also, there's a number of demographics that we have in amateur radio that cause us not to be as outgoing as, the local glee club. And, we don't tend to be as social. And and there's a lot of reasons for that. But, we have, our demographic is not as social as we would like to be. We don't really like eyeball QSO as much as we like the radio one. So anyone else with a comment? Scott?
Just one more thing, Jerry, to amplify something you said earlier about running to be on your homeowners association board. Jerry and I met a ham in Utah County last week who told us that he served on the board for over 10 years, and he had an antenna up at his house, in large part because he served on the board and made sure it was approved.
Yeah, and made sure that there's a provision in the board rules for how you can do an antenna. And James Carville is a Democratic thought leader, and he's married to a friend of mine, Mary, and Mary is a Republican thought leader. And James Carville had an interesting idea in a book he published that I thought was just beautiful. He said, James is a gun control person, and not the kind like I am that says, gun control means use two hands. But James Carville said, if Democrats really wanted gun control, what they should do is all join the NRA. And then when you have more members than everybody else, you vote to change the rules. Now, our challenge in doing something like that in amateur radio is we're 1.1% of the population. And so, to give you an idea in Utah of power dynamics, if you're African American in Utah, if you're transgender in Utah, you're 1% of the population. So you're roughly in that category of power dynamics. So you're not going to be able to show up as ham radio operators and have some mass demonstration and win the day. We will win the day by finesse and by argument and by getting involved and making sure our involvement really amplifies who we are as a population. But we're 1.1% that makes a huge difference in the state of Utah. There would not be a Days of 47 parade without amateur radio. There would not be a Lodajai and a few other things in the state of Utah without amateur radio. And I don't know if I'm a zeitgeist or not, but I suspect it will be very difficult to put on a Winter Olympics without amateur radio, based on the fact that there was an awful lot of amateur radio involvement in the last one. And so these are the types of talking points that we'll be bringing up with legislators at the right juncture. Sean?
Hey, got one last question. So you're here today talking with us. What's the plan to spread the word to all the other clubs?
Well, so we will be sending section leadership to all of the clubs in the state, and some of those that are difficult to get to depending on the weather and other things. There's a good chance that I'm going to heist this presentation from this illustrious club and rebroadcast it without the NFL's permission.
Understood. I mean, I'm just looking at some of our clubs or organizations in other counties have a very, very good working relationship with the emergency coordinators of
Yes.
such county. And I think if we get some of those ECs behind us in a way to sway the legislation, right, it might help us
Yes.
from a communication standpoint, not just an amateur radio standpoint.
Absolutely, and just realize that the section EC is appointed by our section manager, who then appoints county ECs, and we do have great relationships in certain areas. We also have some clubs, particularly in southern Utah, that have what I would call a legislator in the pocket, which is very nice. They have great relationships with those legislators. But, along the Wasatch Front, we really don't have that. And so, and the clubs in rural Utah are also an advantage because the district size is much larger. And so we have lots of representation in Salt Lake County, and the problem with that means we have lots of representatives to try and convince and get to vote our way. But great questions. Any other questions? With that, thank you for listening on behalf of the Utah section. And, you know, I'm an officer in this club, but I also serve on your section staff, as does Scott. And the section field staff is available to this club and available to individual hams on a lot of issues. So if you need help with something, reach out to us and we'll see what we can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry, for speaking on the HOA initiative. Adam, KK7, and JJ here. And just wanted to remind you all, March 12th, thank you, is going to be our next meeting at the potluck. Remind me the name of the building, Bruce?
The Salt Lake County office.
Okay, it's the Salt Lake County offices, the south building north entrance, not the north building south entrance. Please come out. We're still looking for a field-based site. The board's been talking about moving it down into the valley to make it more accessible to our membership. Email me, let us know what you think about that. Come talk to us about it at the potluck, and hopefully we'll be announcing something there. We've got the, Sean, go ahead.
Introduce yourself and your new position.
I did.
To everyone. When?
I did it last meeting, and I just did it a minute ago. Thank you, though, Sean. Okay, Mike, come on down, and we'll get the drawing done. Last call for tickets. Okay.
Hey, Linda, get you to do your thing here. Let's see, how many things do we have up there? Somebody with glasses on want to read these off, because I didn't bring my glasses down.
Yep.
All right.
Could I sneak in here
Yeah.
real quick?
Go on.
Since we're on the topic of stealth antennas, do have two books, Stealth Antennas for Ham Radio and Ham Radio from Indoors, at the book table. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Okay, for the drawing, we've got N7YUQ, N7MFQ, KC7DKR, Miss Linda, N7HVF. Do you need another magnetic organizer? Yeah, we've got a magnetic pickup tool, some screwdrivers, a toolbox, a small toolbox, some wrenches, or a bag. Yeah, I know. Oh, and a high-vis vest.
Do you want the bag, Linda? Huh? Do you want the bag?
Bag's gone.
Bag's gone? Oh, too bad.
Yep.
You want the vest?
Is it like the one I already got,
Oh,
or?
wait, do you want the magnetic?
Yes.
Okay.
K7HSR? Yeah. Your ass caught me off. WJ3RI? You're a winner. I don't see a call sign. Blaine? Blaine?
That's Blaine right here.
Beautiful. Okay. AI7UG? and KG7GOW. Did I read that last one right? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Rick? Okay, thank you all for coming out. Have a great night.